I'm Jennifer Battle, and I'm bringing you conversations about life, entrepreneurship, and the fuck it energy it takes to change the world. I'll also be sharing the mic with trailblazers who said nope to the status quo and created a life or business that was right for them. Tune in each week to hear real stories served with humor, a side of frankness, and a pinch of sass so you know what it takes to be unfuckwithable. Hey, everyone. This is Jennifer back with the Unfuckwithable podcast. And today I have a very special guest, and her name is Ilona Pamplona. Welcome, Ilona.
Hello, Jennifer. Thanks for having me here.
Because I know some of you don't know my guest, I want to read her bio because she's so impressive. Ilona Pamplona is an astrology-informed life coach who guides you to trust yourself through the magic of the stars. She combines astrology, human design, and other self-discovery tools to empower countless clients to reconnect their inner world and harness the magic of their emotions. Ilona believes that the answers to life's questions can be found in our charts as they guide us to unlocking our true potential. Woo! That's really cool.
Yeah, that's my jam.
That's your jam. All right. Well, let's do some peanut butter and jamming over here. No, this is a fun conversation with me because I know Ilona very well. Usually I start off by telling all the stories and spilling all the tea. But this time I want Ilona to introduce how do we know each other?
I will never forget that one of my dear friends, Yaritza, sends me a message and she's like, Ilona, I need someone asked me about an opportunity to speak and I'm not a capacity. I pitched you. And I'm like, okay, like I love networking. I'm a Libra sun. If you don't know, Libra's like the ultimate networker. And I'm like, let's do this. Let's connect. And I'll never forget when the opportunity to connect was with Jennifer. And it was just really funny because here I am getting ready to be like, this is what I do. And this is how it works. And it was a half-hour call. But, you know, our call was like, oh, we were in higher education together. Oh, we completely shifted our lives. Oh, I just moved and you want to move. And it was just this total synchronicity of where we are and where we're going. And half an hour turned into 45 minutes talking nothing about, you know, your container that you host, but really getting to know each other. And that is such a typical experience for me of like, I don't want to know the logistics of how this is going to work. I want to know who you are, what we're up to, what we're creating, and why it matters. And the rest is history. And in that time, I also convinced Jennifer Las Vegas was for her.
Yeah. So that's our Las Vegas connection. Ilona was a person who's like, you know what? You should think about Vegas. I'm like, really? And I did. And we all lived happily ever after. No, but Ilona is now a wonderful friend and also someone who I feel very lucky to know because, I mean, I read her bio, but what she hasn't told you is she works with some really big wigs to help them really understand themselves. It was funny because before I met Ilona, and I'm just going to admit this really, if you said astrology informed life coach, I'd be like, okay. You know, it's another one of those woo girls, you know, who's toting around crystals and telling me to chant and put sticky notes on my wall. But getting to know Ilona, there were just a lot of things that started to really click for me. How did you get from higher ed and more traditional roles and being on the East Coast in New Jersey to becoming, and that was a really crappy New Jersey accent. I realize that, but that's okay.
No one in Jersey.
Tell me how it's supposed to sound. No, but how did you get from doing all that to becoming an astrology informed life coach and really working with some corporate and high net worth executives to help them really guide their path?
So I always say when people are like, how did you get into astrology, period, I say it happened when I was in my mother's womb, because my mother was an avid follower of a very well-known Puerto Rican astrologer named Walter Mercado. Back in the day, he would be on the radio, then on television, and we spent every Monday through Friday and in the radio days, Saturdays and Sundays, watching Walter. Like if we missed Walter one day, my mom was like, I cannot function for the next 24 hours. So I was, I always say I was unofficially a student of his, because for 20 years of my life, because he was very much a presence every day in that cycle, I was exposed to this man who literally made me feel validated as a, like, because I very much identify as a Libra. And I was like, yeah, that's how I feel. Yes, I understand that. And then listening to all the other signs, like, you get to learn. So I learned, oh, it's not that my friend so-and-so is a jerk. It's she's an Aries and she's fiery and she's going to be impulsive, where I'm going to think about things more and I'm going to consider someone else's feelings or how people might experience me because I'm not impulsive and fiery. And so that was always like a core of my consciousness. But of course, parents, my father's like, you have to go to college, you have to do things, you have to get a job. And life tracked me somehow into higher education. I was a foreign language major, also very well seen in my chart. We'll talk about that later if we need to. And I somehow ended into higher ed as a bilingual recruiter, because a university was looking for someone who spoke English and Spanish. And I'm like, bet that was my major, and I did a minor in Portuguese and Italian. Let's do this. And I just ended up there for 15 years. I was like, this uses my skills. And yet, even in those roles, I'll never forget my last job. There would be moments where, like, the whole office, the computers weren't working. And I was not surprised, because Mercury was in retrograde, and Mercury is a planet of communication, and technology disrupts during that time. And people would be like, you're crazy. And by the time I left, people would come in and be like, is Mercury retrograde? Because I'm having trouble with my Word document. And so I made it like very more of like a self-understanding or a collective understanding experience, rather than this, woman on a boardwalk with a crystal ball telling you your future, because that's how I was exposed to it. And so in the middle of that career, I had a nervous breakdown with workplace abuse. It coincided with astrology, my Saturn return. And I realized I never want people to feel like that again. I don't want people to feel like bad work experiences or bad life experiences deserve to perpetuate. Like, I know people who resign themselves to saying, this is how it is, and I guess I have to suffer. And I'm like, no, there are options. And I got a coaching certificate, and I didn't do anything with that. And then I decided to get a master's in wellness coaching with a concentration in mindfulness, because I love meditating, and I didn't do anything with that. And then eventually an unexpected turn happened where my dad passed away unexpectedly. And I had this moment of, well, I could stay in this job track forever, or I can take this example of my dad passing away unexpectedly as a role or as a sign of, you don't know what tomorrow brings. So if you want to do this, are you ready to leap? And it still took me time, probably like 6-7 months after my dad passed away. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make some major changes. And I went all in.
Wow. I can relate to a lot of that story, because I too was in higher education for quite some time and had kind of a wake up call myself. I think one of the things that I take from both your story and just also knowing you is that this whole concept of, well, I'm going to call it astrology, manifestation, meditation. A lot of times, especially the way I grew up, and maybe some of the way the listeners have grown up, is that that's like all like that Harry Potter magic, not real kind of thing. But the more I understand, and some people do very much treat it like that,
Oh, yeah.
But I think what I appreciate about how I hear you talk about it is that it is not necessarily a replacement for your free will. It
Oh,
is
no.
a tool in helping you understand certain things. And then what you choose to do with that is different. So, what do you say to the people who think all of this is kind of like magical unicorn BS kind of stuff? I'm sure you've heard that in your career. And so I just would love to give you the opportunity to respond.
Well, it's all a belief, right? It's a choice of belief. It's all consciousness. And so if you choose, that Henry Ford quote, like, if you do or you don't, it's up to you, right? It's a mind choice, right? And so for me, this work is a choice. There are people who choose to engage in this work dressing up in rainbows and unicorns and like fairy dust, and that's how they can access, right? For me, I don't necessarily judge those people, because for them it is that it's almost like that's how they can actually embody the work. Like being an everyday person might be difficult for them to access the magic in a regular outfit or like being an everyday person. But I also kind of tell someone who sees that as the way that it happens is it doesn't. It's an everyday occurrence. I always joke that I think I was born for this, even in like the culture that I was born in. My father was from Colombia, my mom's from Ecuador. And in Latin America, there's a genre of literature that was very popular called magical realism, like, and for me, the way my family was raised is, yes, like my dad had to go to work and he was like typical immigrant mentality. You got to hustle. But we also had my mom who was like, but that the vibes are bad. Let's clear out the energy so that the everyday life that we have to experience feels more open, feels like it's not constantly blocked. So there was this magical realism that I was raised with where it's like, yes, you have to pay your bills, but there are little sprinkles of magic that you can use to ultimately, for me, put in your brain the possibility that there are choices, that there are options, that there's a way through.
Oh, I love that explanation because it truly is. It is. I love the word magic because it does feel magical, but not fake magic. But gosh, I don't even know how to explain it. Well, I'm just going to defer to you on that one. Back in July, when you did come to my container and you did give a talk, the talk was about something that I found so super cool. And you called it the manifestation equation. So I thought that was interesting because the words manifestation, is this, feels very like nebulous, spiritual. And then the word equation feels like logic and, A plus B equals C. So, what is the manifestation equation for people who were not lucky enough to hear you speak in my group this past summer?
So I was lucky that on top of being raised with magic, I've actually been formally trained in coaching. So it's not that I'm just like, oh, let's be woo woo. It's no, I understand behavior change, the process, the mindset. And I was in a coaching container where they taught us that intention plus mechanism equals results. And for me, those words didn't feel very magical, right? And for me, it was really much easier to break it down in a simpler way. Intention is why. Why are you doing something? Mechanism is how. How do you plan on executing the thing of why things matter to you? And that creates equals into the results, which is the what, right? And what I experience and what I understand is whenever I work with a client, whenever I'm talking to a friend, whenever someone is talking about making a goal happen, even on social media, you'll see, this is how you get this. This is how you do this. This is how this happens. And so people go directly to the how. And what I learned is that actually knowing what you want and why you want it plays a much bigger role in manifestation than sitting down and understanding the how. How really is the last step, but we all go to it as the first step.
Yeah. And I think, at least the way you've described it, the word manifestation could just be swapped out for results. So the what plus the why equals the result versus what was it? The
Well, the what
result.
is the result? The
Right.
what is the result? And
The
that's
what is the
also
result.
what is a result, right? Because, and that's another thing, right? I know people who are like, okay, like I've worked with clients and they're like, I want to start I want to turn this small business into an empire. And then they'll come into a coaching call. They're like, okay, these are the things and these are the all the monetizations. And I'm like, wait. Why does it matter? What do you actually, yes, these are the hows, like all these lines of possibilities or hows and these mechanisms. But let's talk about exactly what you want to manifest, right? So some people go, oh, I want to manifest $300,000 a year business. And I want, or some people, let's even go return back. People are like, I just want to have a business. I want to own a business. I don't want to work 9 to 5, which is awesome. But if all you want to do is have a business and not be in a 9 to 5, and you don't know what you want to create from that, then you're just going to be in the how, the mechanism of being in the business. And the result that you're going to have is having a business, but you might not have the results of how much money you want to create in that time, how much time freedom you're going to experience when you do that, things like that. So it's important to really understand, what do you want as a result of all this manifestation you're having, or all this effort that you're going to put into it. What do you want at the end? A lot of people don't even know what they want. It's very high level, it's unclear, and sometimes they feel bad, they feel guilty for wanting those things.
Let me throw in an example of my own, because when you put it that way, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, that's how I got to Vegas. So I knew, and I didn't know anything about the manifestation equation. This is just like me. I knew that I wanted to relocate. I knew that was something I was very, very clear on for many, many years. I knew I wanted a fresh start. I knew it was important for me to be in a place where I could be creative, and where I felt warm, and it was comfort that I was going for. And I lived in a cold weather state, and I know snow is pretty, but I wasn't trying to be with snow. I wanted to be around beauty because I knew those things would be inspiring, because ultimately I wanted to live a life where I could be inspired and inspire others. So that was my what and why, I guess. So I wanted to relocate, and I wanted to be in a place that felt very special and inspiring to me, because I wanted to be creative and I wanted to inspire others. And I remember when I was looking at places, because I am a very logical strategist kind of person, it's hard to turn off sometimes. So I literally created my little spreadsheet, and I was like, here are all the things that I need. And then I would go through and logically go through all the cities in the United States and check and check and check. And I found myself so frustrated. Nothing felt right at all. And here, enter you in our conversation. You're like, you should check out Vegas. And I was like, huh. And that was the first time I really released the how, and I listened to my gut. And then I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's book a trip out to Vegas. And I did. I left my little checklist at home, and I just got off the plane, and I looked around and took a deep breath and said, do you see yourself here? And I let all the feels do the talking. And I realized it hit the what and the why. I mean, it felt so good. And then it became a no brainer. And I said to myself, this is it. This is it. This is where I'm going to live. And I had no idea how exactly it was going to. Yes, I did look at townhouses, and I mean, I did all that kind of logical stuff because, yeah, I did want to see the neighborhoods where real people lived and not just a strip. But the second half of that story is that there were there was a thing that I thought I was going to do, and it worked out completely differently for the best. And now I live in a place that I love, in a neighborhood that I never thought I would live in, but I think it's absolutely perfect. Now, you work with some really interesting people, and I'm not saying that you should divulge all your client lists or anything like that, but can you give some other really fun examples?
It's interesting. The first example comes to mind is a client that I had. There are a lot of people who look good on paper, and then we as observers go, how did they do that? But when we actually pull back the curtain, there are parts that of them that are, it challenge and break down, and they don't know how to get out of that. And so one of the things, had a client who, like, on paper was amazing. They're like in a home, and technically they had a partner, and they have an amazing job in government. And when we pull back the curtain, there was this energy of not feeling the power that they had, and not knowing that the partnership that they had was actually very much not aligned, right? And so this awakening happens when you're like, I am in a terrible relationship and I don't know how to get out, because I've never had to manage this experience of, really navigating heartbreak, even though, it makes sense, right? Like any outsider could be like, of course, dump the dude, get out of there. And there's this coaching phrase that it's how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? And so for me, right, like, yes, you can look good on paper in your business, but these behaviors, these codependencies, these limitations on ourselves will trickle in no matter how far we get in our other parts of our world. And so, we worked on the mindset. We're like, what do you really want? Like, really, the first few sessions, actually, the first few months were like, what do you really want? Because there was a lot of lack of clarity, not being sure, not being able to get out of something that seems obvious to the outsider, because the result that we all want was not sure. You cannot get to a goal, my friends, if you don't know what your goal is. And when we got clear on that, then we actually understood why it mattered. And that empowered this client to be like, wow, look at all that's possible for me in my world when I really understand what I want and why it matters to me. And not just because I have to, or the sense of like, these are the things to break yourself free or empower yourself or be a better person. When you reconnect with that heart-centered self-connection, that self-awareness of what you need to do and why you need to do it, everything else just started clicking. And then it all began to magnetize. And so, I know that there are going to be people going like, oh yeah, of course, all this manifestation stuff, but I need you to hear that the actual root of the word manifestation comes from Latin manifestus, which means to seize with your hand. It is not a passive experience. It's not light a candle and then the things will happen. It is actually, really aligning with yourself, with the energy, the consciousness, the belief system that you need to go for the things you want. And so it's not actually that action at first. It really requires that mindset, that self-awareness, that self-alignment to then go and create the experiences and even magnetize experiences from the point of self-clarity.
Yes, all of this. And I thank you for that example, because I do think that there is an epidemic. No, I'm kidding. There's a challenge with people figuring out what they want. And I know I personally experience this because I think there's a lot of noise. So there's a lot of what people think they should want, what their parents say they should want. And even in your own example, when you're talking about your dad, you said your dad's like, Mija, you have to go get a job and blah, 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 blah. And I think that that's our parents or our families who want the best for us, but sometimes it blurs what we know is true inside of ourselves. Comment on that. Do you see people who the hardest part is determining the what, and then how do you get them unblocked to get them to the point to be able to name it for themselves? And I just think, sorry, I'm going to ask you that question and then talk. Like, I see a lot of people, this was a big one for me. There are a lot of big celebrity coaches who are at this 7-figure mark, and it just somehow 6-figure, 7-figure became this badge. And so everyone's like, well, you want to be a 6-figure coach, don't you? Or you want to be a 7-figure coach, or you want to make 5 figures, like all these damn figures, And so everyone is orienting themselves and orienting their business to go this way, and then can't figure out why it's so hard or why it doesn't feel good. And finally, I had to ask myself, I don't want to do all that shit. Like, that looks, that feels like my old job. Why do I want to do that? I know I can do it well, but that's not what I want. And so I literally sat down and asked myself, if I lived the life that made me truly, truly happy, how much does that cost? And guess what? It's nowhere near 7 figures. I mean, it's like 6 figures, but mom's got expensive taste, but that's good. But even that traveling and hanging out and getting my massages and all this other stuff. And so I decided, like, what would that business look like? So I think there's a huge, huge, huge issue with the figuring out what we want, because it's so clouded with what the world is telling us that we should have.
Well, it's so interesting because when you talk about those, I feel like I need to address those coaches first, because what those coaches are teaching in those processes are the how. That's the last piece of the manifestation equation. You don't start with, this is how you're going to make 6 figures. And a lot of them go into, these are all the things I do to make 6 figures. These are all the mechanics. These are all the hows. And that's why a lot of people aren't reaching that. But then these people continue to monetize it because they're feeding this core desire, right? There are core needs. Money is a core need. There's a goal. Like, there are truly people who want that. But it's not about knowing that you want 6 figures or 7 figures. It's, why do you want it? And how much of that do you really want? Like, what of money do you really want? Like all of us have a financial goal. I know very few people who don't have the goal to create some kind of financial stability. Even rich people are like, I want to go to this next level, right? But but when you know why, right? Some people are starting to give themselves permission to make money because they're like, because I want to contribute to my friend's business. If I make six figures, then I can invest in my friend who does hair and nails, and then my sister's friend who does like body contouring. And if I have this wealth, I can let other people's dreams come true. That is a much different motivator to making money than like, let's make money for the sake of making money and sitting on wealth. And this is why we have this very toxic cultural relationship with money, because there's this lack of connection to why money matters. Money is not evil, but the people who tend to have lots of it tend to be perceived as such because they seem to be wasteful or mishandling of it, because a lot of us are also not giving ourselves the permission of money to be of contribution with it, right? And so the money is neutral. Everything's neutral. It's how we use it. Everything's a tool, even like the conversation I read about AI. But let's go back to the original question, which part of me even forgets what the original question was.
Girl, me too. I don't remember. I love that you were bringing up money, because you and I had the conversation the other day that money is like fake. It doesn't really exist. And yes, I mean, yes, there's a physical, there's coins, there's paper, there's the numbers in your bank account, but it all represents something. And so when people are thinking about that manifestation equation and thinking about the what and the why, it's not, I want to make money. It's what is it that money does for you? What is it? And why is that important? And I think for those people who are a little bit like, I'm not woo, I don't believe in all this spiritual stuff, it's like, maybe ask yourself that. Forget all of that spiritual piece if that's not your jam, but ask yourself, like, if you have this big financial goal, what do you want to do with it? No one just wants to be like Scrooge McDuck and sit on piles of money. I mean, but we do want to do something with it. So what is that what, and then the why? And so that was like a big aha moment for me with this whole manifestation equation. I know I had asked you a question and we both kind of forgot what it was. So I'm going to move on to a different piece. And now let's talk about the how in the right way. So we know that we normally start with the how, like that's human nature. People are saying how to do this or how to do this in 5 steps. And you're saying we need to start with a what and the why. What does that how look like then? When you have started with the what and the why, where should we try to go after it? Should we just wait for it to come? I think this is where, for me, it sometimes gets a little foggy.
So I love this because for me, this is where it might feel woo, but it's like the how unfolds when you know what and why, right? So let's say that someone's unclear and they're like, I want to start a business. That's what I want. And so they go through the logistics. Okay, I'm going to open up my LLC and I'm going to get all these hows. I'm going to get the bank and I'm going to put up a social media account. And you're going to be doing all the hows, right? But if you didn't know what exactly a little more clearly and why it matters, you're going to be doing the things and you're going to maybe not even realize that you're creating results because you're not sure what you're creating from all these mechanics. And you're going to be, for me, when you focus on the how, you're like a hamster on a hamster wheel, right? Is the hamster there because they want to do 30 minutes on the hamster wheel? Is the hamster there because they want to bring their heart rate up to a certain point? Do they want a certain amount of steps? If you don't know what I want to put my heart rate here, I want to do 10,000 steps, I want to, spend 50 minutes, then you're just going to be howling. You're just going to be, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? I always tell people, like, the how just shows up and it seems really trite or woo-woo or manifesting, but like, I don't ever focus on the how. The how always shows up when you are 100% in letter and spirit clear on what you want and why that matters. And so I will never focus. I have a client that has been with me for like since the beginning of the pandemic, like literally since 2020. And it's funny because usually I don't like to work with clients consistently because, you have a goal and you make the goal and you're done, right? But I've become her oracle, basically. Like I'm her forecaster or energetic forecaster at this point. But what was funny is in the beginning, she would come to me. She's like, these are the things that I want to work on. And I'd be like, whoa, 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 girl. Like, let's take it a step back. Why do you want that? And then when we got into the why do you want that, all of the emotional, heart-centered, real core values would come out. And then she would be clear on the how. It wasn't, let's work on the how to make it work. It's, why do I want this? And then I can be clear on the how. So I'm never going to tell you how to how. I'm going to tell you, know your what and why. The how will appear. That it's I can't explain it any further than that. Like when you're really aligned, everything becomes clear and apparent.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons I wanted you to be one of the mentors and coaches in my upcoming program called What's Next, because this is a program that's designed to help people with big decisions or who want to do big things or take big next steps. And I think oftentimes we are asking ourselves the wrong questions, like again, starting with the how or not really understanding the what and the why. And I think that's a huge, huge part of figuring out what's next in your life, and whether that's personal or business or whatever. And that's what I explain to people, that when I'm walking you through either a one-on-one session with me or in your case, as you're working with clients, we don't need to be the subject matter experts. I don't care if you're a technology guru or whatever. I don't need to know that. You're the expert in that. But there are going to be some very basic things about how you are looking at the situation, how you're making decisions, why it's important, that need to happen first. It's changing that whole decision making paradigm. And this, I think, is a key part of it.
I remember our question, the one that we couldn't answer, which was like that conditioning of the world and your parents and all that stuff. And so this also reminds me, the reason I will never tell you how to how is because my job is not to give you the conditioning of what I believe is going to work for you. My job is to pull out of you what you truly want, and create a certain level of self-trust so that you can go and manifest what you want, trusting yourself, because this is your journey, right? My father came from a poor farm in Colombia. He believed that if I studied computer science, I would be financially safe in a way that his family in Latin America could never be. And it was just a difficult thing for him to understand that I couldn't be like him, who did a job out of obligation and not out of desire. And this is not to say, because there's a lot of complaint about like millennials and blah 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 about being lazy, but what I think these younger generations are showing us is that we have core desires that contribute to the collective. And when we really know what our gifts, our purpose, our mission is, and we pour into that, we actually can contribute to the family, to the obligations, to the collective, to the tribe, in whatever way we came here to do. And by following these patterns, like these coaches, let me show you how I made this, we create this false conditioning that if I do this, I will be happy. If I go to college, I will be happy. And this also came out of so many years of being a college admission counselor, seeing kids literally spend 4-5 years in college postgraduate and then going into jobs and being miserable with their lives, only to realize, hey, I'm a chef, or hey, I can be a podcaster. We're in a world where there's access to new pathways to purpose, and yet we're still telling people, this is how you'll be safe, this is how you'll be famous, this is how you'll be rich. And so our job, and this is why I focus on the what and the why, when you know your what and your why, and you trust your what and your why, the how will always show up. The conditionings no longer get in the way of your true self.
I think that's where we should wrap up, just knowing that you already have the answers, and it's just a matter of developing that self-trust and intuition so that the right steps can come to you or reveal themselves, because it's already there. And that's why I wanted to invite you on to this podcast, Ilona, because Unfuckwithable is really about looking at the world differently than what everyone has always told you to do. And I asked you some questions why people say it's bullshit, it's woo woo. But the thing is, it's like we tend to villainize the things that we don't understand or that are not the things that we grew up with. And as I've gotten older, it's like, actually, this is such a great opportunity to learn and expand my brain and my behaviors just because I didn't grow up with it. But hearing that story about how you grew up with it and listening to the radio show and stuff like that, this is as normal to you as, you know, algebra was to me, because my dad was a math geek. So anyway, I just really appreciate this conversation. And I hope everyone who is listening to this podcast can, if this is not something that they are used to having in their life, the concept of manifestation or astrology or those types of things, I just ask that you kind of pause and open yourself a little bit. And it may not be something that resonates with you, but don't villainize it. Let's stop calling it woo or saying it in negative connotations. Ilona, this is awesome. And because I know you, there's just so much more to the work that you do. So if people wanted to learn more about you, work with you, get in touch with you, what is the best way to access Ilona Pamplona?
I definitely would say Instagram. Instagram is like my primary social media platform at Ilona Pamplona, and my website is fully up and has all my things, including my first book, and hopefully soon my second book will be up there. Any of my offerings are on either of those two platforms.
Yeah, and let's not glaze over that. You are a 2-time author. The first book, which I have actually right over here, is your mood ring journal, which is actually really, really cool. And you and I did like a mini color session thing. And let me tell you, her advice really unlocked me. Y'all have no idea. And I can't even share this effing story because it's, I'll say a whole lot of stuff on this podcast, but I can't tell you all this stuff. It was life-changing and awesome.
Yeah.
What is your second book about?
So the second book is not officially out on the market yet, but what I can tell you, it is a introductory guide to human design, which is a new system that uses astrology and the Chinese I Ching and the Kabbalah and the chakra system to tell you how your energy works. And I know there are going to be people who are like, oh yeah, your energy works. But like, it's been really interesting to learn how all of these ancient, for me, all of these things are not necessarily esoteric. These are ancient self-development tools. And to put them all into one place and say, hey, this is how your energy works best. Here are tips on how you can align yourself and trust yourself and come back to your most authentic self. It's just this continuation of my belief that you just need to know yourself, and not for a sense of hyper individualism, but for a sense of how you specifically contribute to the collective.
All right, folks. So you can find Ilona on Instagram at Ilona Pamplona, or on her website, ilonapamplona.com. And I have absolutely loved our conversation today. I feel so energized, and I really appreciate the passion behind the work that you do. And if you do want to work with me and Ilona, you can check us out in our What's Next program that's coming up in January of 2024. Thank you, Ilona. You are absolutely the best, and I'm enjoying learning from you, and I hope to continue to keep learning from you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening today. We have new episodes every week to fire you up. If you loved what you heard, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. And if you think a friend needs to hear this, make sure you share it with them, and share it as quickly as you would those crazy little dog videos. If you're ready to be around unfuckable, change the world type energy, visit jenniferbattlebrandz.com/joinsrs to learn about Success Revolution Society, a unique entrepreneur community for people just like you.